Okay, here's our interview with Wayne Allyn Root. Well, it's good to meet you, my friend. I didn't know that much about you. I'd heard the name, but I had to do a little bit of research, of course, for the interview. And I realized that you're my personal hero for a number of reasons. Libertarian, I'm on board with you there. Las Vegas, one of my favorite cities. I live in LA, but Vegas is my favorite city, probably. The radio show, which is my dream job. I'm doing this podcast, but I'd love to have a show like you. And sports betting. I used to be in the gaming business. I also ran a publicly traded gaming company. It was a lottery business, but I wish it was sports betting because that's one of my favorite things. That's really how you kind of got. Am I right that that's really how you got into broadcasting? Was
yes.
Mostly through sports?
Yeah, 100% right. Yeah, that was my whole career for 30 years before I ever got, or 25 years before I ever got into politics and political talk.
Yeah.
So yes, I was a sports gambling guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you still handicap the games?
I do just football. I don't get involved in basketball and baseball. I got to draw a line somewhere. I don't have time for all this. Those games are day to day, whereas football's once a week. So I can manage football.
Yeah.
Which I'll actually do this afternoon. Now the Monday Night Football is over. I can spend some time on next weekend's games, which I'll do.
Yeah. Well, we got limited time. So many things I could talk to you about. I know we want to promote your new book, The Great Patriot and Protest Book.
Actually, it's the Great Patriot Protest and Boycott book.
Sorry,
yeah, no big deal. Just to get it right, make sure nobody confuses it or anything. That's what it is, the Great Patriot Protest and Boycott book. And I've got it here to hold up on the screen so people can see it, and we'll talk about it. So anyway, let's get going. Let's do it.
Yeah, so the idea of the book is that so many corporations these days, and we've talked about it on this show a number of times, woke capitalism, they call it. You're simply asking these companies to stop being political, do your job, increase shareholder value, make great products, keep your prices as low as you can, good customer service, and stay the hell out of politics.
That's it. You got the book exactly.
So, and then you go on to provide, information for people for how to protest. But I'm going to start with, I think, what might be a tough question for you, considering that you're a prognosticator in NFL football. NFL is one of the wokest companies out there. So how are you, Wayne, going to protest the NFL?
Start and hit me. Go ahead.
How are you going to protest the NFL?
Are we starting? Is this the podcast?
Yes. Sorry.
Give me the official start. Go ahead.
Well, we usually don't do an official start. My producer just kind of picks up beginning, in and end. So, but look, we can just start with asking you. I'm 100% on board with the idea of protesting these companies, but sometimes it's very difficult to do. And
yes,
for you, one of the difficult ones would be the NFL, considering that's been your life is handicapping NFL football. So how are you going to protest the NFL?
Well, there's lots of difficult decisions. I mean, I tell people all the time, my new book is out, the Great Patriot Protest and Boycott book. And I tell people to buy it. And there's only 3 places you can buy it: Amazon.com, Target.com, and Barnes & Noble. They're all liberal companies. Matter of fact, Target is in my book as one of the companies that we ought to be protesting. And Amazon is terrible, very liberal, very social justice oriented, all kinds of stuff we should all protest. But you'll send the message if you buy only conservative books from Amazon and don't buy everything else from them. Find other alternate places to go. You'll make your voice heard. And I say the same thing about the NFL. I'm in the betting business. I bet on NFL games, but I no longer go to them. I no longer watch them. The Las Vegas Raiders are here. I wouldn't go to a game if you gave me $1 million. I don't pay them any money. The NFL makes no money off me. I bet on the games, and I get paid a very nice income by giving my advice on who's going to win and lose. If someone else wants to watch it, God bless them. That's their issue. But I don't buy their jerseys. I don't buy their memorabilia. I try to not watch the games like I used to. I used to watch 10 games a day. Sometimes I watch 1. So my point is, I've cut back dramatically on the things I do for and with the NFL to show them that I'm punishing them, and I will not reward bad behavior.
Let's continue on the NFL to use that as an example of one of the way too many companies that have gone woke, and get us in the minds of these CEOs and so on. What is your theory as to why, for instance, the NFL chooses to take such controversial political positions? I mean, it wasn't long ago that they were suspending Colin Kaepernick for taking a knee during the national anthem, and now we're at the exact opposite, where they're playing their own special black national anthem before the games.
Well, look, some of it, there's a lot of reasons for it, Jim. Some of it is because you look at colleges. Like I went to Columbia University. My daughter attended Harvard. I'd say those are two of the 5 most elite colleges in the world. And everybody at those colleges was a communist, not a liberal, a communist. They all bragged about being communists. The students, the teachers, the professors, everybody bragged. They're all Marxists. So how do they get there? Well, one gets in and then they hire only people that think like them. So I think all these corporations have been infested by elitist liberals who went to Ivy League schools that hire other elitist liberals who went to Ivy League schools. And pretty much everyone who runs the NFL is a complete, on a podcast. I could curse on a podcast, right?
Yeah.
Everyone who runs the NFL is a complete fucking moron. So, once you see these people in action, which I did at Columbia up close, and when I visited my daughter at Harvard up close, they're just completely horrible people. They, when you ask me, well, why did I go there? Why did my daughter go there? Because once you get an Ivy League degree, it's a ticket to making a lot of money in the real world. You won the lottery. So it's a great thing to get in. You just have to spend 4 years believing in what you believe in and never allow them to brainwash you, because they're all communists who hate America, which is crazy because it's the greatest nation in world history. And the reason they've done well in life is because of America. So they're all complete idiots. So that's who infests all these companies. And once one gets in, they hire people like them who think the same way as them, number one. In the NFL's case, I think the players who are almost all black think a certain way, and the fans in the stands who are almost all white think a completely different way. And the NFL's decided to side with the players, ignoring their own customers, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Biggest mistake in the history of business. Don't worry about your players, worry about the customers. The players make millions per year, and they'll survive if they don't agree with your politics. They have nowhere else to go. But the customers, you piss them off, you don't have an NFL anymore, and ratings are way down. Stupid, stupid business decision. Always take care of your customers. So my book, The Great Patriot Protest and Boycott book, I've got the list of all the woke companies, woke liberal companies in America that are treating us as conservative consumers like garbage. And I give you the name of the CEO, the board of directors, their phone number, their email, their physical address, and their social media address. So you can contact them and you can let them know, I'm not buying for you anymore. I'm going to put you out of business unless you get out of politics. Stop insulting conservatives, Christians, and patriots.
Is the NFL on the list?
Yes, it is. Actually, it is. I put them on.
Good.
Yep.
Good. So, but then you've got other sports, correct me if I'm wrong, like MMA and NASCAR that have not gone in that direction, right?
They're pretty conservative. Yeah. I mean, you look at MMA and you've got a great guy who heads up MMA, UFC is, got a guy who's a big conservative who's spoken in the past for President Trump. You've got NASCAR, which primarily represents conservative values and has a very conservative audience. But the people running NASCAR have done some woke things lately that really annoy me, but not as bad as the NBA and the NFL and Major League Baseball. So there's a few, sane people still left, but even some of them have caved a little bit to this woke nonsense.
So your daughter went to Harvard. I don't know when she graduated, but
about 8 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that.
If she were deciding today, you would tell her not to go to Harvard and protest, right?
Yeah, it was a long time ago, and it was different. I mean, it's very different. Today, I have my son. I have 4 kids. My son never went near Harvard. He got into college 3 years ago, and I told him, don't go near those universities. And he's now at SMU, Southern Methodist University in Dallas, and it's fantastic. No vaccines required, no masks required, in-person classes, fantastic. He's healthy. Everyone's healthy. The whole thing's ridiculous. These Ivy League colleges are insane. You can go to class. You don't need to spend your life in a mask, and you don't need to be vaccinated. It's a complete scam. COVID's not a scam. It's real. People get sick. But the scam is requiring people to be vaccinated against their will, requiring young people to be vaccinated. There isn't one study that doesn't prove that you're better off not being vaccinated. If you're under the age of 30 and in good health, there's no reason in the world to take a chance on a dangerous vaccine. None. Kids don't die from COVID. I think it was, I know it was John Hopkins that did the study of 48,000 young people in America, high school and below, and there wasn't one single death from COVID outside of a handful of kids who had childhood leukemia who died of COVID when they got COVID. If your kid doesn't have childhood cancer, the odds of them dying from the flu are zero. Why would you risk their life with a dangerous vaccine that's completely unproven, that had no double-blind studies, that did not have 10 years of research, that was rushed to production, that is experimental for emergency use only? So, my kids don't go to those kind of colleges anymore.
Yeah, good. Well, I support everything you did in writing the book, and I hope everybody follows your lead on that. Let's just jump around to a few other issues. Your
Sure.
Wikipedia page is a very fun read. So I want to touch on some of the things in there. But first, you mentioned that you interviewed Trump yesterday.
Yes.
Give us the highlights from your interview and tell us, is he going to be running again in 3 years?
Well, he all but admitted he's absolutely running again, but he can't say those words, "I'm running," because that brings up all kinds of campaign rules and campaign finance rules and federal election FEC rules. So he's not in a position yet where he can say the words, "Yes, I am running." He just said, "You're going to be thrilled. Trust me, Wayne, you'll be very, very, very happy with my decision. I can't say more because it would violate campaign finance law." So he all but admitted he's absolutely committed to running in 2024. My issue is, that's all well and good. That's great. I love President Trump, and I'd love to have him back tomorrow. But is the country going to be around in 2024? 3 more years of what Biden's doing to us, Jim, and I don't think America will exist as a country the way it is today. I mean, it'll still be here. I'm not saying it's going to be obliterated, but everything we believe in will be gone. I don't know if we can last 3 years, is what I'm trying to say. So all well and good that my friend Donald Trump wants to run again, but what are we doing between now and then to keep America alive?
Yeah. Well, hopefully in a year, we're going to have a big turnaround in the Congress.
If it's not rigged, as we make this recording, the Virginia election happens to be today for governor, and you'll know a lot about elections rigging by seeing the outcome. Every poll shows the Republican, Youngkin, I think is his name, is how you pronounce it, Youngkin.
Yep.
He's leading in every poll, and McAuliffe has killed himself, just shot himself in the foot. All parents have no right to make any decisions on what their kids learn in school. That's his belief. Crazy. He's done. Stick a fork in him. If he comes out the winner, then it's all rigged. It's all about mail-in ballots with no voter ID and no signature match. If Virginia does what was done in the 2020 election, Youngkin will lose to McAuliffe, and then you're going to know elections are rigged.
So the mainstream media calls it the big lie.
Yeah.
Among other things, they like to call the big lie, but the big lie is that the election was stolen, and that Trump's claim that he won the election. So far, we haven't found any hard evidence of that. What is your position about whether the election was stolen or not?
Well, I know the average person believes it was stolen. I've seen all the polls. Most people now believe that there was massive election fraud in the 2020 election. I don't know if they posed the question, was the election stolen by Joe Biden? The question I saw was, do you trust the election process? Do you trust the 2020 results? Do you believe there was massive fraud in 2020? And an overwhelming majority said yes to all 3 of those questions. Yes, there was massive fraud. No, or I should say, yes, there was massive fraud. No, I don't trust elections. There is no integrity. And no, I don't trust the 2020 election result. So I know most people think like I do, that something very bad happened. Whether you could prove it or not is a different story from what you know in your gut. I know that Trump was on his way to a landslide at midnight, when at that very moment, 5 states colluded and conspired together and said, we're not going to count the vote anymore tonight. We'll pick it up in the morning. That's never happened in the history of America. And how did they each decide to do it at the same time with each other? How did they collude with each other? How is that possible? How is that fair? How is that legal? And when we woke up in the morning, they'd all started counting again. They lied, but they got all the witnesses out of the room. The media and the Republican witnesses were removed from the room, and overnight they suddenly magically found hundreds of thousands of new mail-in ballots with no signature match and no voter ID that all said Biden, 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 and no witness in the room. And suddenly Biden had made up a gigantic lead in 4 of the 5 states. If you keep the lead, Trump wins by a landslide. You flip it the other way, Biden wins by a substantial margin. That was the whole ball of wax. I don't get involved in all the crazy theories or Dominion or any of that stuff. All I know is absentee ballots because of COVID were introduced without any real reason for people to vote at home. They should have gone to the polls. It was all about voter fraud. And they filled out each 100 ballots or 10 ballots, and they put fake names and fake addresses and dead people and illegal aliens, and they stole the election. And everyone with a brain knows I'm right.
Yeah. Well, we still need evidence of that. I would call it, instead of the big lies, it was the big experiment. The idea just months before an election to decide, because of COVID, to mail live ballots out to everyone, whether they're going to be absent or not.
And no one else did it. No one else in the world has ever done it or did it. And no one else in the world, no other normal nation in the world has no voter ID. They all have voter ID. We're the only nation in the world that doesn't have voter ID. It's insanity. You've got to match federal ID with a photo before someone is allowed to vote, or they're going to walk in, walk out, walk in, walk out, and vote 10 times. This is tragedy. This is disgusting, because once they, I believe, stole it, rigged it and stole it, then they've rigged and stolen the country with open borders. Now you may never win again long term, because they're letting in millions who are all guaranteed to vote Democrat for the rest of all time. Disaster.
Yeah, it's amazing to look back and see that Trump won based on the border issues, and we've got a 10 times worse border today than we ever had at the time that Trump was running.
You're being nice. You're being nice. 100 times worse.
100 times worse. My only concern about I'm kind of a Ron DeSantis guy.
I love Ron.
I just think that this should be the unlosable election for Republicans, considering how weak Biden is.
Yeah.
But Trump has been so divisive in the past, and I just think that it gives an excuse to a lot of independents. Let's just be honest. A lot of people don't like his personality. Let's just call it that. His policies.
No, I got it.
Yeah. So my concern is independents. If they put up a halfway decent Democrat, which I have no idea who that would be, but just there's some people that just have a lot of distaste for Trump. I mean, it was a rough 4 years. I mean,
I get it. I get it. And listen, I love Ron DeSantis, and he's certainly my 1A. Trump's 1 and Ron DeSantis is 1A for the next president of the United States. But don't kid yourself, Jim. Ron DeSantis is just as big of a lightning rod as Trump, just as controversial as Trump, just as hated by Trump in Florida by Democrats. Remember, Ron DeSantis represents something worse than Trump. Liberals hated Trump because he's Trump, but he's got the Trump personality and he puts the tweets out that he does. But Trump is pro-vaccine. He thinks the vaccine's wonderful. He thinks it's his vaccine. He gives himself all the credit in the world for that. Ron DeSantis is anti-vaccine mandates. He's anti-masks. He's anti-lockdowns. He didn't lock down Florida. He didn't vaccinate Florida, and he didn't mask Florida. He will be just as big of a target on his chest as Trump ever was. He'll be hated and called crazy and reckless and dangerous and deadly. And he murdered half of Florida. It's the same story.
Yeah.
No
well,
different.
I think I don't disagree with you. I used to say the same thing about Ted Cruz. He was the second candidate to Trump.
Right.
And
Right.
Cruz would have also been crucified.
Right.
But I mean, one reason to support DeSantis is, frankly, based on the stuff you were just saying, he actually is more conservative than Trump.
Yes,
There's no question about that.
He is. I love DeSantis. He's great.
Right.
I love him. He's right up there with Trump for me. So
can we move him into the 1 position and Trump into 1A? Can we get you on record as that today?
I still like Trump in 1. I like DeSantis in 1A. Look, it should be Trump at the top and DeSantis as VP, only because you got to understand, Jim, it doesn't matter what DeSantis says or does. Trump is the candidate if he's in. If he's running, he wins the primary and steamrolls by a landslide. DeSantis has no say in that. You look at the polls among Republicans, Trump gets 90%, DeSantis gets like 3%, everybody else splits 7%. So if Trump announces he's in whether you like it or not. So my goal is to fight for DeSantis as the VP. That would be my druther.
So you're a handicapper by trade. Set the Vegas odds for me, and you just interviewed him. What's the Vegas odds that Trump runs?
Oh, I think it's 100 to 1 that he'll run. I think it's 100 to 1 that if he runs, he'll win the Republican nomination. And then it's slightly better than even money. I'd make him a slight favorite to win. And that's what is in British sports books. We don't do that in the United States. You're not allowed by law to put odds out in American elections in Las Vegas. You can't do it. But at British sports books, which take money from all around the world, Trump is right now the favorite to win the presidency over Joe Biden, which is unheard of. A guy who lost is now favored over the present president who won. Nobody's ever seen that before. As recently as 6 months ago, Trump was barely even registering with those sports books, and now they've got him as the favorite over Biden, and it's only going to widen because Biden's the most hated president ever. Like you said, we're allowed to curse on here. Fuck Joe Biden. Let's go, Brandon. That's what everybody says at every sporting event. The whole nation is saying, fuck Joe Biden. There's a reason for that. He's hated. He's the best thing that ever happened to Jimmy Carter.
So Wikipedia calls you a conspiracy theorist. I just want to hit a couple in the time that we have remaining. My show started with a deep dive investigation into the Las Vegas shooting. And actually, I noticed on your Wikipedia that supposedly, and you can comment on this, that you said on the air soon thereafter that you thought it was Muslim terrorism. But walk us through that comment. And then ultimately, as you sit here today, what are your thoughts about what happened that night?
Well, first of all, liberals are liberals, otherwise known as communists, are great at listening and recording every word that a conservative says at a speech or on a radio show or on a TV show. And I spew out millions of words. My job, I have no script. I have no teleprompter. I have no assistants. I go on national TV and national radio 3 hours a day. At one point, an hour a day on Newsmax TV. I'm not on there anymore, but I was 3 years, 750 episodes, the #1 host on Newsmax TV. And I just shoot from the hip and tell you what I think about every single issue going on in the world. So if you want to hold it against me that I said something in the first 5 minutes after a terrorist attack, and then maybe a month later, once you've had time to digest and reflect, I'm at talk shows. That's my job. Maybe I come up with a different conclusion, or maybe I move on to the next topic. You want to hold 5 things I've said against me in 20 years of being on TV and radio. That's what liberals do. It's hilarious. It's just insane. Because if I did that to them, Rachel Maddow and Bill Maher and all the people on national TV who are liberal, they've all said awful things.
It just happened to a man in your city, Jon Gruden.
Yes,
not even for public comments that he made, but for an email a private email 10 years ago.
And I'm on the record as saying that's insane and wrong, and Gruden should still be the coach of the Raiders. And what we should do is make public, therefore, all the private emails of the commissioner of the NFL, every coach in the NFL, every player in the NFL, every owner in the NFL. And if anybody's ever said something wrong ever in a private email that you would consider to be racist or sexist or just terribly intolerant, fire them all, and that'd be the end of the NFL. This is insanity, what we're holding people to. So all I could tell you is anything you'll find on Wikipedia was written by extreme liberals who hate my guts, and they find one sentence in 20 years that they could take out of context, and they've got like 5 of them out of 20 years. So good luck to them. I say God bless them. Good luck.
And one thing I can say that I've just recently learned about Wikipedia, I used to donate to Wikipedia. I love Wikipedia, but it is now getting scrubbed. It has become woke. Yes. There's things in there that were taken out. In particular, critical race theory used to talk about its ties to Marxism. That has been scrubbed, but from Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is no longer even a trusted source.
Wikipedia is terrible. You can't trust a word that comes out of Wikipedia. It's all liberal writers whose goal in life is to character assassinate the Wayne Roots of the world. That's what they do all day long. It's a miracle that I'm even in there. It's a miracle that there's one positive thing in there. There's a miracle there's any truth in there. 90% of it is made up BS or things taken out of context. So that's what I think about Wikipedia.
Yeah, well, I didn't think it was always that way, but I'm getting
no, it may not have been, but it is now. That's for sure.
Okay, so back to Las Vegas shooting. What do you have any unique thoughts on what you think happened that night, or do you kind of subscribe to essentially the FBI's analysis of it?
No, I've never subscribed to the FBI. You know, I shoot from the hip. I tell you what I think. I believe something much worse happened than anyone has ever admitted. I believe that Sandy Hook in Connecticut, that school where the kids were shot, the FBI studied it for a year. Then they put out a 100-page report about Sandy Hook. They studied, it took them a year to study the Vegas massacre, and they came out with a 1-page report. 1 page. I believe the whole thing is BS. I believe it's like John F. Kennedy's assassination. You're never going to know what happened. Do I know what happened? Absolutely not. I know that everyone in the entire Vegas who I know believes the story we're hearing is BS. It's a cover for what really happened. I don't know what really happened. I've never claimed to know what happened. Unlike what Wikipedia says, I never said anything like that. I've never said I knew what happened, ever. I don't know, but I know it wasn't one fat, out of shape, middle-aged white guy with no military training who woke up one day and decided to shoot hundreds of people. That's the most absurd story I've ever heard in my life. And I just don't believe either he did it at all, or I don't believe he did it by himself. Maybe he had a lot of help, but it's a lot more to the story than we know. But I don't know what it is. So to ask questions like that gets me in trouble all the time. And you know what? I have a gigantic following, and they love the fact that I ask questions and don't accept as fact what the government says, what Fauci says, what the CDC says, what the IRS says, what any government institution says. They're all liars, proven liars, never accept what they say. So I don't know what happened in Vegas, but it's much worse than I think anyone has ever been allowed to hear.
Yeah. Well, and coming up with theories, there's nothing wrong with that. That's how we get to the truth. So the idea that it could have been Muslim terrorism certainly was one of the possibilities at the time.
It was one of the possibilities, but I don't know if that's the fact.
Needed to be looked into. In fact, I'm remembering now, because it's been a while since I covered this, but ISIS claimed responsibility for the attack.
It's worse than that. ISIS put out a video only months before the attack with a video of the Vegas Strip that they had filmed. Their people were on the ground in Vegas, and blood was dripping on the video, and they promised that they were making Vegas their #1 target. Then it happened, and they took credit for it, not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times. To my knowledge, and the experts I brought on my show, never in history, as much as we hate ISIS, as disgusting as they are, as horrible as they are, never have they lied about taking credit for an attack they weren't involved in, and they bragged about it 4 times. But there is no proof from any government or any law enforcement organization that they were involved. So I can't say they were. I could just say that this was much worse than one old, fat, out of shape white guy waking up one day with no military training and deciding to assassinate, to carry out the worst terrorist attack in America's history and the worst mass murder in America's history. I just don't believe that's the real truth, and I will probably never find out what else was involved.
But I mean, what is your best theory at this point?
I just don't have. I honestly don't have one, Jim. I swear to you, I don't know. The idea that it was Muslim came just from the fact. I mean, I covered that as a possibility because they took credit for it and they promised it, and it seemed like he had help, and there was more than one person involved. I've interviewed on my show 20 people who were there when it happened, and all 20 swear shots were coming from 10 different directions. They saw gunfire in multiple directions. It wasn't one guy. And yet the FBI and the police say it was one guy. So look, I don't know what happened. I just know we're not getting the right story.
What about this Sheriff Lombardo? Because I remember when we covered it, there was a lot of reasons to be very, very critical of Lombardo. One of them in particular was, the police officer that was very cowardly, just hunkering down on the 32nd floor when the guns are firing from the 33rd floor, if I have the floor straight, in Lombardo's defending him. Now I'm hearing that he's running for governor.
Yeah, look, here's the story. I'm a straight shooter. I was as critical as anyone about everyone involved in it, but that doesn't mean I'm against Lombardo for governor. He's the Republican candidate for governor. If he wins the primary, and I don't know that he will, because I'm for anyone that wins the Republican primary. The governor of Nevada is a crazy liberal Democrat who locked Vegas down, who'd love to do vaccine mandates for all of us, who's masked us all. He's following the footsteps of Gavin Newsom in California. His name is Steve Sisolak. He's the enemy. I never get mad when I agree with you on 70, 80% of what we believe in. My guess is I would agree with Joe Lombardo on 70 to 80% of everything. And the stuff we disagree on, heck, that's better than 0, which is what I agree with Sisolak on. Whoever wins the GOP primary is my candidate for governor of Nevada. I want to defeat and rip out of office this horrible human being, Steve Sisolak. Joe Lombardo is a cop, and I like cops. And whether or not it was the perfect way to handle the massacre in Vegas. Whether you and I could have done better, I have no idea. The pressure that was put upon him to say whatever, to agree with the FBI, I have no idea. I wasn't there. I've never said I could do better. I just don't know. But I was the guy who pointed out the coward cop. That story all over the country was because of me. And so, I'm there for all this stuff, but that doesn't make a guy bad. He's the police chief of Vegas, and nobody's ever had a situation quite like that at a hotel and a concert in the history of Vegas. How it was handled, maybe it could have been better, but I don't want to be a backseat driver.
Gotcha. Well, I promised to hold it to 30 minutes, and we're at the 30 minutes, Wayne. So I really appreciate all of your candor and all your thoughts, and we'll promote the book one more time.
There it is, The Great Patriot Protest and Boycott book. Lets you know all the names of the corporations, all the CEOs, all the board of directors members, and how you contact them. I give you the entire resource directory. It's like a whole protest movement in a little thin book. It's I usually write 400-page books. I've written 15 of them. This is the thinnest book I've ever written, but it was the most research I've ever done to get all this information. This is a very valuable book. I think it's priceless. It could change the direction of America if we can bring these corporations to their knees and get them to stop being liberal and woke and get out of politics. The Great Patriot Protest and Boycott book. I'm Wayne Allyn Root. My website's Root for America. Jim, thank you for having me on. God bless.
Thanks, Wayne. Rest that
Bye-bye.
voice. Say hi to
Thanks.
Donald for me.
I will. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you again to Wayne Allyn Root. Everybody go check out his book, The Great Patriot Protest and Boycott Book. Thank you to our producer, Michael Parker. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of The Hidden Truth Show.
Thank you for listening to The Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow. You can find us at hiddentruthshow.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hidden Truth Show. Join us again next week for another episode of Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow.